Hi, I'm Peter. Welcome to episode 5. Quite a delayed episode 5 in this series on concert photography. COVID kind of caused the delay, to be honest with you. It kind of messed up my industry a little bit the last couple of years, as you're probably aware. Anyone watching this has probably gone through something similar. But things are getting a bit more normal now, so I'm glad to be back and doing regular videos again. So I know nobody likes a long preamble, so let's get into the meat of it. This video is going to be about mirrorless technology. I get so many questions about why I switched and what my experiences of that switch have been. So I thought, well, now it's time to make a video and go through all the experiences that I had, what made me switch and my experiences of switching, and what are the pros and cons. So if you're a fellow concert photographer, or indeed any kind of photographer, hopefully some of this will be useful to you. Feel free to drop any questions in the comments and let's get stuck in. So my first experience of mirrorless was in a Costa Coffee in London in 2016. I met up with a friend of mine just to have a chat, fellow photographer, Dan Rubin, and he'd brought along the Sony A7S. And by the end of the conversation, he'd been telling me how impressed he was with the camera, and he said, "Why don't you borrow it?" And I really was quite pessimistic about mirrorless technology, quite frankly. I didn't like the idea of a digital viewfinder, and really that was it for me. I had written it off as a technology, naively and stupidly, and now, to be honest with you, looking back on it. But I borrowed the camera from him, and I brought it to a gig that night. And I ate humble pie very, very quickly, because I only shot with it for a few minutes at that gig. But I was immediately struck by how bright and vibrant the digital viewfinder was, in a way that I didn't feel separated from my subject. I felt connected with it. And having the real-time element of actually seeing what my camera was seeing, rather than having to stop and look at the back of my camera, meant that I actually felt more directly connected with my pictures, with the artwork, than I did with a normal SLR. It was totally the opposite of what I expected. So it was very, very soon after that I realized that there's a huge benefit to that, in a fast-paced environment like music photography, I wasn't looking at the back of my camera anymore to check the shots, because I was seeing them as I took them. So, it takes time to get out of that muscle memory of checking the back of your camera to look at the shot you've just taken. But I realized very quickly that this is a big deal, and I really need to, investigate this mirror technology further. So having talked about the connection to the photo, I want to talk about something intrinsic to mirrorless, which really lays the groundwork for everything that follows. Mirrorless, unlike an SLR, it allows the sensor in the camera to be exposed to light all the time. A mirror doesn't pop down in front of it. So with that continuous nature of the sensor, where it's always receiving data, it means that allows the camera to be constantly analyzing data and not be interrupted by a mirror dropping down in front of it. Now, this allows very accurate information to be overlaid on the screen as you're using the camera, really helping you to get your shots. And fundamentally, that difference between SLR and mirrorless gives mirrorless a major advantage. Now, for me, that major advantage is very, very powerfully demonstrated in a feature called focus peaking. Now, focus peaking allows an outline, when you're in manual focus, be put around things that you are focusing on and the things that are in focus in the composition. And as you adjust your focus, those lines will move back and forward in the Z-axis further away and closer to you. On the screen now, actually, you'll see a little video of me just in my living room. I put a lens in a stool and I was zooming in and out. And you'll notice the outline color around the lens here. Now that color can change to a different color, because it might be that you're shooting against a particular background that has a color that is the same as the peaking outline, which wouldn't be much use. But that feature was a major thing for me to discover quite early on, because I do a lot of very selective focusing in low light environments. So having that bright outline, which is adjustable in strength, by the way, allows me to work very, very quickly in manual focus. Because there are times I focus on things that no automatic mode will ever pick up, because it'll be maybe an arty thing where there's a particular logo or a particular shape that I'm trying to get in focus in the foreground, for argument's sake. So it's a killer feature for me in low light environments, and one of the big reasons why I love mirrorless now. Another advantage for me of mirrorless, again based on that real-time computation that's going on all the time, is IAF. Now, there are technologies like this for various brands. I happen to be a Sony shooter myself, but I'm not here claiming that these features exist only on Sony cameras. But I use the IAF features on the Sony a7R IV and the Sony a7R III, which are my two primary cameras. And IAF is essentially a mode where instead of the camera locking onto the face, it locks onto the eyes of your subject. Now, when you're shooting at a very shallow depth of field, which I very often am in a low light environment in a gig, having the difference between it just locking on someone's cheek versus their left eye or their right eye is quite a big difference sometimes. If I'm quite close to them, or if I'm on an 85mm, for instance, at 1.4, or a 50mm at 1.2, for example. So being able to have the camera real-time track the eyes of an individual and even give me the ability to prioritize which eye is a fantastic thing. It's also really handy in the pit because it's a solution to the problem where a camera will sometimes focus on the microphone. It's happened to me so many times in the past where I think I've gotten a great picture and I discovered that I focused on the microphone and not the lead singer's face. And the IAF is really a feature which just stops that problem in its tracks. Its performance in low light, obviously, I mean, with the kind of work I do, I'm really testing the feature. People moving around the stage in a wide variety of multicolored lighting. And to be able to say that I can rely on this feature, even in those environments, is a great recommendation for you trying it if you're on a mirrorless camera or if you're considering using one. Another great feature which goes hand in hand with IAF is actually face registration. It's a feature whereby you can prioritize different faces to be the priority for autofocus in the camera. And if you combine things like the IAF with face registration, it really can be very useful both on stage but also backstage behind the scenes when there's lots of people milling around, enabling you to get the right people in focus. So on the Sony cameras it's called face registration, and I believe it's available in other names on other manufacturers' bodies as well. Another feature that I want to talk about is real-time histograms. So histograms for me are very, very important. I work in an environment with rapidly changing lights that often change when I don't expect them. And having those in real time in my viewfinder overlaid in the corner of the image are fantastic for me. Now, bear in mind, I obviously shoot in RAW, and there is obviously a good element of where you can push and pull highlights and shadows in post. But I, like most photographers, like to get it as right as possible in camera, and being able just to judge that in real time rather than relying on my eyes, which, you know, if the lights are particularly challenging and particularly bright, I can't trust my eyes to really adapt quickly enough in some occasions. So having that kind of real-time histogram gives me the confidence I need to get the shot I need and not worry about whether I've got it or not and just move on to the next thing I need to shoot. The next thing I want to talk about is vintage equipment. I love collecting old lenses from all over the world. Some of them on eBay, Amazon, in charity shops behind the counter. And, you know, I'll pick up adapters for them online. And sometimes it's just, you know, a quick £15 adapter from Amazon, and it can work very, very well. But I had these old lenses. Some of them are quite fast. Some of them are very slow. But obviously, most of them have no autofocus whatsoever. And features like I was talking about, like the focus peaking especially, can be really handy, enabling you to work very quickly with those lenses. So I have a couple of old Helios lenses. I think Helios 44 is the name. And those Helios lenses have a very unique look to them. They give a very dramatic, in fact, here's actually a picture of Rick Astley I took. If you look at the unusual bokeh behind him and this shot I took of him on a roof in London a couple of years ago. But these lenses, being able to use them quickly and reliably when you're using a feature like focus peaking, it's a great upgrade for this old equipment, which has led me to being able to use these unique lenses in really commercial shoot environments where I know what I can achieve with it, and taking the mystery about whether I've, you know, got the focus point just right with this lens. I mean, obviously I'll test the lens before I take it out in the field, and I'll test it at home and do shots of the pets and the like. But this is a great, you know, a great upgrade for this equipment. It's worth mentioning, obviously, and this, I guess this is less a mirrorless thing in general, it's just a technology thing, that low light technology has improved so much in the last few years that vintage and older lenses are becoming more and more practical, because slower lenses, you know, f4 or f5.6, that in the past would have been useless for concert photography, are, because of increased performance at a high ISO, are suddenly becoming more practical. So in a way, the cost of entry into this business is getting a little bit lower when you consider things like that. And the upgrades of some of these features I'm talking about, especially the focus peaking with this gear, is fantastic, especially if you're adapting lenses where autofocus might be either very, very slow or not function at all. So all these features that I've been talking about the last few minutes, they've added up into something that changes the workflow for me entirely. I take a lot less pictures at a given concert now than I used to, mainly for two main factors. One is I'm not taking insurance shots anymore because I know when I've got the shot because I'm seeing what my camera is seeing. And secondly, I have that extra confidence in what I've taken on top of that because of some of the features I've been talking about, like the focus peaking and the IAF and the histograms overlaid on the screen. So these things have combined into me taking a lot less, and because I have a much higher hit rate, my success rate with the images is much higher. I'm also, when I'm shooting with an artist for the first time, I capture unexpected moments much more often than I would in the past because I'm not stopping to check my camera. You know, if it's an artist I know really well, I know when I can stop and have a look at images based on previous experience. But with a new artist, I don't have that experience. So not having to put the camera down to check stuff really means I capture those moments and really I can provide more value to my client. The next major benefit for me is at home. If I'm taking less images, it also means I'm editing less, which means I'm spending more time with my family and my kids. I'm also saving hard drive space. And really, I'm spending more time working on the images that I want to work on rather than flicking through ones I don't. So these things all add up to a better quality of life and more productive workflow. And for me, it's why I've embraced mirrorless, and quite frankly, I wouldn't go back. So now that I've said I wouldn't go back, I'm not trying to imply that SLR or digital SLR technology is bad. Far from it. I just mean for my industry, the benefits of mirrorless I have found far outweigh any negatives. And to be honest with you, the negatives for me are very, very few and far between. The only one I can really, I guess, put a name on now that I'm thinking about it is really that for the first few years of these cameras, I found them quite small in my hand. I was used to a much heavier camera because I've got big hands and I was very used to the balance of a heavier camera. But that's changing, primarily because some of the bodies now, like for example, the A7R4, they have a lovely big grip on them, which makes it much more comfortable and familiar for me. And, you know, they are still slightly lighter than my SLRs, but to be honest with you, not to the point anymore where I find it odd holding them. I certainly adapted and got used to it, but having the bigger grips, which is becoming an option now, is definitely a bonus for someone like myself with quite large hands. Yeah, so let me know what you think in the comments. Feel free to ask any questions or suggestions. I'm curious to know about your experiences with mirrorless, or if you're an SLR user thinking about mirrorless and you just want to reach out to me, you can do so via the comments below on social media, direct message on Twitter, or just send me an email on YouTube at shootthesound.com. That's YouTube at shootthesound.com. In the meantime, keep well, and I'll see you soon. Thank you very much.